Welcome to our viewers. Thank you for joining us at our webinar today, Virtual Tech and Takeout, Be a Data Hero, Crush Storage Costs with Igneous and Cloudian. Joining us today are Steve Leeper, Igneous Solution Architect, and Warren Halliday, TOLA Sales Rep for Cloudian. Welcome, Steve and Warren. With that, I will hand it over to Steve.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Well, everybody, want to walk through a few things with you today. So, as a starting point, just want to start off with a simple review of the current future state of unstructured data that resides on NAS systems today. I don't think it's any surprise to any of us that no matter what industry you're in, the amount of unstructured data, it's growing. And in many cases, it's being stored on multiple different NAS systems distributed throughout the organization. And like I said, industry doesn't matter. Financial institutions are accumulating massive amounts of data. It's usually in small files like check images, ATM receipt images, and things like that. Healthcare records are accumulating, and imaging systems are generating larger and larger files. Seismic data in the energy industry, all of this data is accumulating. And we've got a number of new applications on top of that that are generating more and more machine-generated data, such as call detail records and mobile networks, sensor data, machine-to-machine applications, interaction logs, such as with autonomous vehicle operations, all this kind of stuff, right? It's all just a deluge of data. And we're starting to have to, manage this data. And that's a challenge, right? So what kind of challenges does unstructured data give us, right? So it's difficult to deal with because you've got billions of files that are typically seen in a normal environment these days. And it wasn't that long ago that it was just millions of files was a big deal, right? And these billions of files are starting to roll up into petabytes of capacity. The file systems themselves, they tend to be complex with a mix of deep and wide directory structures, while others are narrow and shallow. And then even within these directory structures, we've got pockets of large and small files, and each one of those pose their own unique challenges. So all of this leads to an inability to accurately visualize the environment in aggregate. Like, what do we have, right? That becomes a tough question to answer. So to be able to protect the data in a consistent manner across these multiple source systems, and then there's further challenges in moving the data when necessary. So that brings us to Igneous and Cloudian. So together, Igneous and Cloudian are going to give you a super simple, scalable solution that allows you to archive aging data to the Cloudian HyperStore. It's also going to allow you to apply consistent data protection policies to the source system, which allows you to store the backup data on Cloudian as well. So Igneous itself is very flexible and it's source system agnostic, and that general ease of use is complemented by the fact that the software is delivered as a service. And what that means is that Igneous will monitor the health of the VM, the status of all the tasks running. We'll triage any kind of failures. We'll also push out regular software updates as all the critical care and feeding is provided by Igneous. So in some sense, it's like the software is kind of like the application on your phone, right? I mean, just applications just get updated. You pick it up in the morning, you got a new version of your application. Well, that's a lot how Igneous is, except it's in your data management environment for your unstructured data. And just a little bit about Igneous. So we've been around since 2013. The company's founders have a tremendous amount of NAS experience. Our development team has experience working at Isilon, at NetApp, at Cumulo, parts within EMC. And we've also got expertise on the team with former Microsoft, Google, and Amazon developers. So we understand NAS and object storage very well. The company was really formed to deal with the increasing NAS growth and the need to bridge NAS data to public or private cloud storage. And today we're focused on the type of private or hybrid cloud solution that many organizations need. So a great way to build that private or hybrid cloud is with Cloudian. And with that, I will pass the baton over to Warren so he can fill us in a little bit on Cloudian's capabilities.
So this is Warren Halliday with Cloudian. I'm here to give you a very brief overview of our technology and also hopefully some of the reasons why you might consider us to be the target for all of your archived unstructured data. So Cloudian also started early in the 2000s, around 2011, and early on we decided to focus on S3 as a protocol And Amazon, obviously, today has become the most used capacity public cloud there is, and their native protocol is S3. And we determined years ago that ours would also be, our native protocol would be S3. So today, we are the widest deployed independent object storage in the world. And if you're not familiar with object store, you all use it. If you're using Netflix, YouTube, Facebook, all of these providers of large unstructured data sets use object store to store this data, because object storage is different from block SAN storage and file storage in that it is infinitely scalable. It's evergreen, which means that once you put data out there, you will never have to move it, because an object store inherently is a cluster of nodes that can be upgraded and refreshed a node at a time without having to worry about the services that the object store is offering up to your users. So we say that at Cloudian we offer the highest S3 compatibility. It's because we are S3 as a protocol. It is our native protocol, so we don't have to have any kind of gateways to S3. We do provide, though, gateways for NFS and SMB for all of your applications that can't see S3 as an endpoint, don't use S3 as an endpoint. We say we have limitless scalability. It goes back to that object storage I just mentioned, and that is across any number of data centers, wherever they may be in the world or local. So that is an inherent ability of object storage. And then this last part is sort of a marketing pitch, but it's poignant because Gartner's very well respected, but we are the highest rated object storage vendor on the Gartner Peer Insights, which simply means they poll actual users of object storage, and they ask them about their experience with the product that they're using. And as you can see to the right there, we have the highest of all. And then a couple of comments from an enterprise architect that just says we can start small and grow big, which is different from a lot of other object stores, because most start very large, and we can start with as little as 10 terabytes with a software-only implementation, or 100 with hardware, and go as high and as large as multiple exabytes. So Cloudian, again, HyperStore, want to make very clear we're not a service. We are an on-prem S3 compatible enterprise storage. There are basically three kinds of clouds. There's the public cloud, there's a private cloud like we're offering with hardware and software for you to own your own S3 service. And then if there's a hybrid cloud, which we facilitate with native gateways to all the public clouds. So you put our software or software and hardware in your data center, and you then own your own S3 service that also can offer up capacity to other applications that need to see NFS and SMB. We're simple, we're modular, we're cost effective. We get to the point very quickly where we are about a half a cent per gig per month. And this is not a perpetual fee. This is based on 3 years of support or 5 years of support across a cluster, and our minimum cluster is three 1U nodes in terms of hardware, and that 3 nodes can offer up about 100 terabytes of capacity. With 5 nodes, we can offer up a half a petabyte. And we'll talk about how that gets bigger over time, but we can go from that small implementation to over exabytes, and at a savings, we say, of 65% over public cloud, but that also equates to a huge savings over large filer systems as well. So exabyte scalability, we have companies across the planet as a worldwide company, Cloudian provides storage of exabytes, but hundreds of petabytes to many, many customers. We have that limitless capacity because of Object Store. We are a node. We have a peer-to-peer architecture, so each node stands in as does every other node, and we grow both performance and capacity as we add nodes in a linear fashion. And this just is interesting because now our biggest nodes, I mentioned our smallest nodes are 1U. Our biggest nodes are 4U. They have 96 drives in 4U with 2 nodes, and allows us to offer up over 10 petabytes of usable capacity in a 42U rack. So I'm going to pass this off to Aaron Gibson, who's our principal architect for my region, and he's going to talk to you about the Cloudian value and our differences.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Warren. So yeah, Cloudian does pride itself on its level of compatibility with the S3 API. It's the only API that we support, and with that, it gives us a lot of focus to be able to ensure and guarantee compatibility with any existing AWS S3 services you might be using. With that, we also offer all the things you'd be accustomed to, being able to do encryption of the data, whether that's in flight or at rest, enforcement of worm through object lock functionality, and giving you granular controls for authentication of various tasks within the environment. We have also introduced and added in IAM support, giving you the ability to create temporary user style accounts with very specific and focused access they can have, whether that simply be they can only read or write a particular object, or if they have the ability to do further things within the environment. As Warren mentioned, we give you the ability to start small and scale as large as you want, without any restrictions in how you grow. So starting with our smallest configuration of 3 servers, the flexibility to seamlessly grow your environment from there to hundreds of servers spread across multiple geographic locations without any limitations. For service providers, we often see a lot of demand and requests around multi-tenancy, but this is also still relevant in enterprise environments as well, being able to ensure that one group of users doesn't have the ability to cross over and see or be counted into another group of users. And with that, providing granular quality of service restrictions for the size and capacity of buckets, or just simply ensuring that a particular user doesn't overrun the resources of the environment through multiple gets, puts, or delete operations. And providing you a simple to consume, either via API or through reports that the system will generate automatically, billing details, so that you can see what the cost savings would be of using this on-prem versus using it in a public cloud environment. It's all well and good to have these features, but we have to ensure that data is protected and has a high level of durability. So by giving you flexibility to pick and choose how your data is distributed across your environment and how it's protected within those, whether that be utilizing replicas or utilizing erasure coding technology. You can have both types of data protection deployed at the exact same time, and pick and choose per container, per bucket, how or if you want them to be replicated between those locations you might have. What this gives you is a ability to have multiple nines of data durability to ensure your data that was written on day 1 is the exact same data that you'll retrieve years down the road. All of these features and capabilities can be configured per bucket, so you have a lot of flexibility in how you manage and deploy your environment over time. And it wouldn't be complete without the greatest benefit that Object Store really offers, which is allowing you to define custom attributes to your objects. This is something that you don't get the flexibility to do with the traditional NAS or SAN environment. And Object Storage allows you to create custom tags that you can put on your objects that you can then later go back and index and search against to find things in your large archive repository.
Thanks, Aaron. And just to summarize, suffice it to say that Cloudian is the most advanced and mature on-prem object storage solution available today. And with that, I'll pass it back to Steve.
All right, thank you, Warren. We'll pick it back up here. So we'll talk a little bit about archiving here. So historically, and I fully expect a couple of heads to kind of nod north and south because we've probably all been through this a little bit. Archiving has been problematic, right? So there's somewhat of this circle of pain here, as I call it, where primary storage is starting to fill up, right, and it's starting to get somewhat critical, right? It's a challenge because the admin has to remove some unnecessary content, right? And all they can do is go back to end users and ask them, hey, can you remove some, or can we remove some of this content, right? And the end users think about it, and they're afraid they'll never see any of their data again, so they just throw a few breadcrumbs out as an offering, right? But it turns out to be nothing substantial, right? So more storage gets purchased, and then we repeat the cycle over and over again, right? So these storage platforms just continue to get larger and larger. So there's got to be a way to break this cycle. And the way to break the cycle is to start first with getting visibility into the environment. So Igneous has the ability to reach out into all of the NAS systems in an environment. And you need this visibility into these systems to show the aggregated capacity that you have across all the systems in the environment. And then you also need to be able to break down that capacity across all of the member systems, right? And once you have that, you really need to understand what the activity of the data is. So as the saying goes, facts are stubborn things, right? So once you have this organizational visibility into the data, you get a clear sense for what can truly be archived. And in fact, the majority of Igneous's customers find that over half of their data hasn't been accessed in over a year, right? That's just data that's sitting out there on expensive production, tier 1 storage, and it's collecting the proverbial digital dust. And that just doesn't make sense, right? So in order to beat that, we give you the ability to not only identify that data, right, because having the analysis done is fantastic, but you need to be able to take action on that information that you have. So we make this really easy by providing the ability to navigate through the file system to identify any kind of archive candidates out there. And when they're identified and agreed upon with end users, application owners, whoever the constituents may be, it's a simple mouse click to initiate the archive with the Cloudian HyperStore as being a destination. So once you click on this archive, it's going to copy, Igneous is going to copy this data out to the Cloudian HyperStore from the source system and validate the data along the way and make sure that any data written to the Cloudian is in fact 100% valid as part of the archive operation. Now, once you have that done, right, the archive is done, and this is true of backup as well, and we'll talk about that in a second. But even though you've archived some data, it may have been sitting in an archive for some period of time, a year, 2 years, something like that. But it may become necessary to retrieve that data. So part of Igneous' solution is a highly scalable and searchable index that is based on all of the metadata that's found on the source systems. So as we go through and scan these systems, we build a large metadata index. So this gives us the ability to provide an easy way to search for content in a very simple way, right? So you can search for individual files, directory structures, anything, any kind of file naming pattern or directory naming pattern can be supplied, and Igneous will show all of the content that matches that pattern. And that data can come from any of the sources. It'll be all, the search results will be aggregated into a single view. Now, once you found the data that needs to be restored, it can be restored at the share level, the directory or the subdirectory level, or even at the individual file level. The data isn't ever copied by any legacy means like NDMP, so Igneous will default to suggest a restore back to the original platform that it was copied from, but ultimately that data can be restored to any destination that's desired. So, for example, you may have archived some data off of a NetApp cluster and you want to restore it to a pure FlashBlade. No problem. Very easy to do. It's very easy to use, and it's really fast because all the operations involved in all of this behind the scenes, they're heavily multi-threaded, and they're automatically throttled based on the observed operational latency. So we'll talk a little bit about backup here, since we addressed the basics of archiving. Just a quick note on backup here. So the traditional approach, it's just running out of gas, right? It's a complex web of backup software, media servers. You might have NDMP accelerators. Might have virtual tape libraries and/or deep duplication appliances. So that's a lot of stuff, right? And with the volume of data that many organizations now maintain, it's becoming difficult, if not downright impossible, to keep SLAs intact and manage the cost because they're just rising higher and higher. So like with archiving, we really kind of need a different approach, given the modern data sets that we're encountering today. So looks similar to what we looked at before, but Igneous and Cloudian give you, just like with archiving, give you a great backup solution, right? So the data protection capabilities, they're source agnostic, just like with the archiving. Does not matter what type of NAS device is on the source end. This data protection capability is delivered by the same virtual machine that runs the discovery services and the archiving that we just talked about. So Data Protect will discover all the SMB shares and the NFS exports in the environment, and it will allow assignment of consistent backup policies to ensure that data is protected as you desire, as it makes sense within a given organization. So Data Protect can easily write the contents of these backup tasks to the Cloudian HyperStore for a super cost-effective, high-performing, and scalable backup solution and data protection solution. So regarding the backup methodology used, Igneous will perform an initial full backup, and then after the initial full has been made, all subsequent backup operations will be incremental. So essentially, it's an incremental forever approach, and while we're doing all this copying of data, we're also compressing it as it's written to the HyperStore. During the copy operations, all the data, as I mentioned before, it's validated. We use hash digest as the data is read from the source, and then it's compared to the hash digest that's created against the data written to the HyperStore. So once the HyperStore, once it's on the HyperStore, right, then as Aaron mentioned before, you've got geoprotection, erasure coding, and all kinds of great goodness in there to provide additional protection for those backup sets because you got to protect those as well. From a performance perspective, a question, this kind of will pop up periodically. When there is, at scale, it's really important consideration because the potential for a massive amount of data to be archived and protected, it can create a really large, workload on the source system. So there's only so many hours in the day, and there's on top of that, the source NAS systems we're scanning and copying data from, they're production systems, and they already have a healthy workload on them, or several workloads on them. So I mentioned before, Igneous is heavily multi-threaded. The application stack has the ability to scan and copy data at line rates. So NFS and SMB clients in the software, what we've done is we've written our own user space clients, which are essentially purpose-built for the type of I/O activity needed for our purposes. So by running in user space, the clients, they're not subject to kernel interrupts and other delays that traditional kernel-based clients would suffer from. It also means that we generate significantly fewer IOPS while performing the archiving and the backup copy jobs. But even with that in place, the workload on the source can get pretty heavy. So we don't want any negative impact on the source system. So what Igneous will do, it will automatically throttle its operations. And what that means in a nutshell is each of Igneous's threads will execute operations, and then the latency on those operations are monitored. So as the latency climbs, Igneous will reduce the number of thread operations. It may even reduce the number of threads even executing in order to reduce the workload issue to the source system. So the net result we get from that is that Igneous will run as fast as it can given the opportunity. So when you have periods of low activity, overnight, maybe, early in the mornings, right, we're going to run as fast as it can, right? But as the workload builds, the latency will build, and we will throttle operations back in order to not have any kind of negative impact on those production workloads. But the key here is that this happens automatically. There's no manual intervention required to make this happen. There's no jumping on the source system, looking at the element manager, looking at CPU loads, and then going into Igneous and maybe turning some knobs and switches to try to make it all behave a little bit better. All of this happens automatically, so it's very, very easy to use. As far as scaling out, so and we also support multiple location installs. So when it comes to deployment, so Igneous can work easily with a smaller environment and scale up to larger environments. The design criteria for the software is, in its current state, it was set to address trillions of files and exabytes of capacity. So we can address extremely large environments, and this criteria, it continually evolves with our development team. So as the market continues to evolve, we just keep raising the bar higher and higher for what we're capable of dealing with. With respect to multi-site locations, Igneous can be deployed in multiple data centers while writing content to the Cloudian HyperStores. There's also the ability to protect remote sites with a centralized solution. So we have customers, for example, that have remote offices that might have, they might have 5 or 10 or 20 terabytes individually at various locations on various platforms. Might be a mixture of Windows file servers in one location, maybe a small NetApp appliance in another one, and a third site might have a Dell Unity. They've just got a little mixture of everything, and they need a single solution to be able to interact with all these platforms and protect data in a centralized manner, right? So this isn't a problem with Igneous and Cloudian. It makes it very easy to reach out to all these disparate platforms, and then it's really one-stop shopping for managing those data sets at those remote sites. So that's certainly something that can be done as well. So in summary, so we've covered a lot of ground, and we've covered it very quickly. We started off, we really started confirming what we already know, that unstructured NAS data is growing. It's getting hard to manage. We talked about Igneous' software-defined analytics, its archiving capabilities, and its data protection abilities, and the fact that it's delivered as a service, right? And that's really a key interesting point about the Igneous' offering, because the monitoring, the care and feeding, et cetera, all of that's provided by Igneous. So as a customer, the only thing that has to be done is to set up policies that define what activity is going to take place, right? And then Igneous monitors to make sure that all of those policies are running, and that there are no issues, right? So it's very, very simple to deploy and run within an organization. Warren, Aaron, I'll if you guys want to chime in on anything else on there on the combined offering, feel free to add to it.
I'd just like to reiterate that we start small as an object storage provider, as few as 3 nodes, and we grow to exabytes. So we offer limitless scalability. Multiple locations can be utilized across any geography worldwide. We're a great backup repository target because we're evergreen and we scale infinitely, and we can offer up native gateways to all the public clouds. So if you want to push copies out past us to Glacier or an archive like Azure Archive, we can do that by policy. And then we offer up immutable and non-destructive, immutable place for your data to reside, along with that ability to expand without any issues with the performance or the availability of the cluster. Thanks. Thanks, Steve.
Perfect. Yes, thanks, to the entire team. This pretty much concludes our webinar for the Virtual Tech and Takeout via Data Hero Crush Storage Costs. If you do have any questions, please be sure to reach out to Cloudian at info@cloudian.com and Igneous info@igneous.com. We'll be happy to address those. And again, please be sure to check out the attachments below for more information. Thanks for joining us, and special thanks to Steve, Warren, and Aaron for the time today. Thank you, guys.